This story is titled, When I Found Out My Adopted Daughter Was Planning to Take My Precious Items and Hand Them Over to My Ex-Wife, I Set a Perfect Trap and They Both Got Arrested. Sup Reddit, my name is Marcus, and I'm 39 years old. I'm a single dad living in Wisconsin, working as a construction foreman for a mid-sized company. It's nothing glamorous, but the pay and benefits are decent enough to provide a stable life for my family. I own a modest 3-bedroom house that I managed to buy right before the housing market went completely insane, and I drive a 2019 Toyota Camry that's finally paid off. I'm not rolling in cash by any means, but I'm financially secure and responsible. Keep that detail in mind, because it becomes important later in this story. Now, let me tell you about my ex-wife Victoria. We divorced 8 years ago when our daughter Lily was just 9 years old. Victoria left because, in her words, she needed to find herself and wasn't ready for the responsibility of motherhood. What that really translated to was that she wanted to party and sleep around, living like she was still 22 without a kid cramping her style. So Victoria packed up her things and moved to Las Vegas with dreams of becoming an influencer and life coach. I use air quotes around those titles because what she actually does is post thirst traps on Instagram and sell overpriced meditation courses to lonely housewives. Basically, she runs a one-woman scam operation. She's managed to build up about 60,000 followers who think she's some kind of enlightened guru. But the reality is that she's just a deadbeat mom who abandoned her child. Here's the part that will absolutely make your blood boil. Victoria hasn't paid a single penny in child support. Not once in 8 years. Every time I try to enforce it through the courts, she pulls some excuse about being between opportunities or needing to invest in her spiritual growth. Meanwhile, her Instagram feed is a constant parade of expensive dinners, designer handbags, and luxury vacations to places like Cabo and Tulum, with whatever sucker she's dating that month. I've been raising Lily essentially as a single parent this entire time. All the morning routines, homework help, doctor appointments, parent-teacher conferences, driving her to friends' houses, and dealing with teenage drama. It all falls on me. Victoria calls maybe twice a month, usually when she wants to look good for some new guy by playing the caring mother role for about 5 minutes. But here's where the story gets interesting. Lily, despite having a mother who basically abandoned her, has somehow convinced herself that Victoria is the cool parent, and I'm the boring, strict one holding her back from her fabulous life. It's classic teenage logic, I suppose, but it stings nonetheless when you're the one who's been there every single day. The situation got significantly worse about 9 months ago when Lily started dating this absolute waste of oxygen named Kyle. This kid is 18 years old and looks like he stepped straight out of a How to Spot a Future Felon handbook. He treats my daughter like his personal property, and it makes my skin crawl. Kyle has a juvenile record for vandalism, failed his junior year twice, and drives his mom's beat-up Mustang like he's auditioning for Fast and Furious. He has the kind of attitude that makes you want to throw him into oncoming traffic. I've watched this kid grab Lily's arm too tightly when she doesn't immediately comply with his demands. I've heard him call her names when she doesn't do exactly what he wants. I've seen him pressure her into situations that make me want to bury him in my backyard. But try explaining to a 17-year-old girl that her boyfriend is trash. You might as well try teaching quantum physics to a goldfish. She's completely convinced that Kyle is misunderstood and that I just don't get their relationship. The final straw came last Thursday night. Lily bounced into the kitchen around 7 p.m. with that fake sweet voice that kids use when they want something big. "Hey, Dad. So Kyle's friend Ryan is having a party tonight at his house," she said with practiced innocence. "I was wondering if I could go." I already knew this conversation was going nowhere good. "Whose house? Where are his parents?" I asked, setting down the dish I was washing. "Ryan's parents are out of town, but it's just going to be a small thing with a few friends from school," she replied, still maintaining that sugary tone. I nearly laughed out loud. "Lily, it's a school night. I don't know this Ryan kid. His parents aren't home, and you're asking me to drop you off at an unsupervised house party. The answer is no. Dad, please. Everyone's going to be there. Kyle's friends already think I'm weird because I never get to do anything fun," she pleaded, her voice starting to crack with frustration. "The answer is still no," I said firmly but calmly. That's when my sweet, loving daughter decided to show me exactly what she thought of dear old Dad. What happened next was like watching someone you love transform into a completely different person right before your eyes. Lily's face went from fake sweet to absolutely furious in about 2 seconds flat. "You are ruining my life," she screamed, her voice echoing through the kitchen. "You don't understand anything about me. You don't understand what it's like to be in high school. Kyle's friends think you're a pathetic loser. And you know what? They're right. I stayed calm, keeping my voice level despite the venom in her words. Lily, I understand you're upset, but name-calling isn't going to change my answer. But she was just getting warmed up. I hate living here. I hate this stupid house. I hate this boring town, and I hate you. She was screaming now, completely unhinged, her face red with rage. You want to know what I really think? She continued, her voice reaching a pitch that probably had the neighbors wondering what was happening. I wish you were dead. My life would be so much better if you just died. The words hit me like a physical punch to the gut. I've been called names before. I've dealt with teenage tantrums and hormonal outbursts. But hearing your own child, the person you've sacrificed everything for, the person you love more than your own life, tell you they wish you were dead, that's a special kind of pain that cuts deeper than anything else in the world. But she wasn't done. Oh no, she was just getting warmed up. At least Mom's new boyfriend Brandon actually gets me, she continued, her voice cracking with emotion. He understands that I'm not a little kid anymore. He's more of a father to me than you'll ever be, and I've only met him on video calls. I can't wait until I turn 18 so I can move to Las Vegas and live with them, and never have to see your pathetic face again. Now let me tell you about this Brandon character because this part is particularly rich. Victoria's been posting about him on social media for about 7 months now. He's a 33-year-old entrepreneur who sells supplements and crypto trading courses online. The guy drives a leased BMW, wears enough gold chains to anchor a small boat, and has probably had exactly 3 conversations with Lily via FaceTime. But according to my daughter, he's apparently Father of the Year material. I looked at Lily for a long moment while she stood there, breathing hard, her face still red with anger, looking like she was ready to throw something at me. This was the kid I'd been raising alone for 8 years. The child I'd given everything to. The person I loved more than my own life. And she had just told me she wished I was dead. So I made a decision that would change everything. Noted, princess, I said quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. Lily blinked, clearly caught off guard. She was probably expecting me to yell back or ground her or chase after her like I usually did when she had these dramatic meltdowns. Instead, I just turned and walked calmly to my room, leaving her standing there in the kitchen. If she wanted me dead, then I'd give her exactly what she asked for. Starting Wednesday morning, I became a ghost in my own house. And let me tell you, it was the most educational experience either of us had ever had. Dead people don't make breakfast, as it turns out. Wednesday morning at 10:00 a.m., Lily came bouncing downstairs in her pajamas, expecting to find her usual Wednesday morning feast. I always made her waffles on Wednesdays. Crispy Belgian waffles with fresh strawberries, turkey sausage links, and fresh apple juice. It was our little tradition that I'd maintained for years. Instead, she found me sitting at the kitchen table, calmly reading the newspaper and eating a simple bowl of oatmeal, acting like she didn't exist. Dad? Dad, I'm hungry. Can you make waffles? She asked in that same tone she'd been using her whole life, the one that assumed I would drop everything to cater to her needs. I turned the page of my newspaper with deliberate care, maintaining complete silence. I found an article about local property taxes particularly fascinating that morning. Dad? Dad, I said I'm hungry, she repeated, her voice taking on a slightly more urgent tone. I reached for my coffee and took a slow sip, reading an analysis of the city council's budget proposals with intense concentration. Lily stood there for a full 10 minutes, saying Dad, in increasingly panicked tones before it started to sink in that I wasn't responding to her at all. I watched her go through the entire 5 stages of grief right there in the kitchen. First came confusion. She couldn't understand why I wasn't acknowledging her presence. Then anger, as she started raising her voice and demanding my attention. Bargaining followed, with promises to clean her room and do homework without being asked. Sadness came next, with her voice getting smaller and more desperate. Finally, acceptance set in, as she realized I genuinely wasn't going to respond. She eventually figured out how to make cereal for herself, which was apparently a much more complex process than she'd ever imagined. It took her 4 tries to find the bowls, which have been stored in the cabinet above the dishwasher for the past 8 years. She used the last of the milk without thinking about tomorrow, and managed to spill more cereal on the counter than actually made it into the bowl. Watching her struggle with this basic task was both pathetic and enlightening. Dead people don't give rides either, as Lily discovered the very next morning. Thursday morning at 7:45 a.m., she came running down the stairs with her backpack slung over her shoulder, already 15 minutes later than usual because nobody had woken her up. For years, I'd been her personal alarm clock, gently rousing her from sleep and making sure she had enough time to get ready without rushing. "Dad, I'm going to be late. Can you drive me?" she called out frantically as I walked past her toward the garage, car keys jingling in my hand. I got in my car and drove to work while she stood in the driveway with her mouth hanging open like a fish out of water. In my rearview mirror, I could see her frantically waving her arms and yelling something, but dead people don't respond to teenage dramatics. For the first time in 2 years, Lily had to take the school bus. Welcome to how the other half lives, sweetheart. But here's where it gets really interesting. Dead people don't pay for luxuries either. Friday afternoon, Lily came home from school and asked for her weekly $60 allowance like nothing had changed. This was money I'd been giving her every Friday for the past 3 years. Money she used to go to the mall with friends, buy trendy clothes, or grab overpriced coffee drinks that cost more than some people's entire meals. She just stood there with her hand out, expecting money to magically appear like it always had. "Dad, it's Friday, allowance day," she said with that same entitled tone she'd been perfecting for months, her palm extended expectantly. I stared right through her like she was made of air. She tried waving her hand in front of my face, snapping her fingers inches from my nose, even jumping up and down a little to get my attention. Nothing. I just kept watching SportsCenter like I was completely alone in the house. "This is stupid, Dad. I need my allowance," she said, her voice taking on that whiny quality that teenagers perfect when they're not getting their way. "I'm supposed to go to the mall with Jessica tomorrow." Silence. The only sound in the room was the television and the quiet hum of the refrigerator. But the real fun started Friday evening when Lily tried to use her phone and discovered that dead people don't pay for unlimited data plans, Spotify Premium, or Netflix subscriptions. I'd spent Friday afternoon methodically canceling every single service that made her life convenient and entertaining. Her phone was basically a paperweight now. No more TikTok binges, no more streaming music while she did homework, no more staying up until 3 a.m. binge-watching shows she didn't even really like. Just silence. "Dad, my phone isn't working," she called out, panic creeping into her voice. "The internet's not working either. What did you do?" I flipped to ESPN and turned up the volume slightly, finding the baseball highlights particularly engaging that evening. She tried calling Victoria to complain about my supposed breakdown, but Victoria was conveniently on a spiritual cleanse retreat in Tulum and wasn't taking calls. Even better, Victoria's Instagram stories showed her partying on the beach with Brandon and his friends, drinking expensive cocktails and posing for photos. Real spiritual cleansing happening there. Lily spent Friday night sitting in the living room with me, trying different approaches to get my attention. She tried apologizing in that fake, dramatic way that teenagers do when they think saying sorry will immediately fix everything. She tried crying, big, theatrical tears that would have won her an Oscar if this were a movie. She even tried pretending to be hurt, clutching her stomach and moaning about mysterious pains that required immediate parental attention. Nothing worked. I was committed to this strategy, and I'd be damned if I wasn't going to see it through to the end. By Saturday, word was getting out that something was seriously wrong at the Thompson house. My phone was getting blown up by Victoria's sister Linda, who Lily had somehow managed to track down and call from the school's landline during lunch break on Friday. "Marcus, what the hell is going on?" Linda demanded when I finally answered. "Lily called me crying, saying you've had some kind of breakdown and won't talk to her. She said you won't feed her or drive her to school or give her allowance money. Is that true?" "Hey, Linda," I said in a perfectly normal voice, like we were discussing the weather. "Lily's fine. She's just learning some valuable life lessons about how the world actually works. She said you won't feed her, or drive her to school, or give her allowance money. Is that true?" Linda pressed. "Dead people don't do those things," I explained matter-of-factly. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could practically hear Linda processing this information. "Marcus, I've known you for 13 years, she finally said. "You're many things, but crazy isn't one of them. What did she do?" So I told Linda exactly what Lily had said to me Thursday night. The whole thing, word for word. I recounted how my daughter had screamed that she wished I was dead, that my life would be better without her in it, that Brandon was more of a father to her than I'd ever been despite having met him exactly 3 times on video calls. Another long pause. "Oh, that little bitch," Linda said, and I could hear the anger building in her voice. "You know what? Good for you. Victoria's been filling that kid's head with nonsense for years about how she's some kind of victim, and you're the bad guy holding her back. Maybe it's time she learned what life is actually like when daddy's wallet isn't bottomless." Linda was on my side. Good to know I wasn't completely losing my mind. Saturday afternoon, Lily made her next strategic error. She brought Kyle over to the house, probably thinking that I'd have to acknowledge them since we had a guest. She was banking on my ingrained politeness and social conditioning to force me to break character and interact with them. Wrong move, kiddo. I was in the kitchen making myself a sandwich when they walked in together. Kyle immediately started with his usual alpha male routine, trying to establish dominance in my own home. "Hey, Mr. Thompson, how's it going?" he said with that cocky tone that made me want to introduce his face to the nearest wall. I methodically made my sandwich: turkey, Swiss cheese, lettuce, tomato, and just a touch of mustard. I cleaned up my mess, wiped down the counter, and walked right past both of them like they were completely invisible. Kyle's face went through several different expressions as he realized he'd just been completely ignored by a grown man in his own house. You could practically see the gears turning in his tiny brain as he tried to process this unprecedented situation. Lily, is your dad okay?" he asked, his voice betraying a hint of uncertainty that hadn't been there before. "He's being a psycho," Lily said loudly, clearly hoping I'd react to being called names. "He's been ignoring me for 4 days because I won't let him control my life." I locked myself in my home office and could hear them talking through the door. Kyle was saying things like, "Your dad's weird, man," and "My dad would have kicked my ass by now for disrespecting him like that." Real winner, this kid. The irony was completely lost on him that maybe, just maybe, his father's approach might have produced a more respectful teenager. About 20 minutes later, Kyle actually had the balls to pound on my office door with his fist. "Yo, Mr. Thompson, this is messed up, man," he shouted through the wood. "You can't just ignore your daughter like this. Be a real father and handle this situation." I didn't even look up from my computer screen. I was busy working on something that would become very important later, documenting every single thing I could find about Victoria's lavish lifestyle while claiming she was too broke to pay child support. See, while Lily was having her little meltdown about not getting chauffeur service and unlimited data, I was playing a much longer game. I was methodically building a case that would eventually bring Victoria's house of cards crashing down. Sunday was when things really started to escalate to new levels of desperation. Lily's phone had been completely shut off because I'd canceled our family plan entirely. So she had to use the ancient landline in the kitchen, you know, the one that actually plugs into the wall, to call her friends and complain about her terrible situation. I could hear her whining to her friend Jessica about how insane and abusive I was being. "He won't talk to me, Jess, like at all," she said, her voice carrying that dramatic flair that teenagers use when they think they're the star of their own tragic movie. "He looks right through me like I'm not even there. He didn't make dinner last night, so I had to eat cereal again. This morning I missed the bus because nobody woke me up, and I had to walk to school. My phone doesn't work. I don't have any money, and Kyle thinks my family is crazy." Good. Kyle thinking we're crazy might be the best thing to happen to this entire situation. Maybe if he thinks there's drama and instability here, he'll move on to some other poor girl whose father hasn't figured out what a waste of space he is. Monday morning, Lily missed the bus again and had to walk the 2 miles to school. I watched from the kitchen window as she trudged down the street in those designer sneakers I'd bought her for Christmas, probably cursing my existence with every step. Her backpack looked heavy, and she kept stopping to adjust the straps. She wasn't used to walking that distance, especially not while carrying all her school supplies. Around noon, my office phone rang. "Mr. Thompson, this is Mrs. Patterson from the cafeteria at Westfield High," said a pleasant voice on the other end. "Lily tried to buy lunch today, but her account is empty. We let her slide this time, but you'll need to add money to her account for tomorrow." "Thank you for letting me know," I said politely and hung up without making any promises. I didn't add money to her account. Lily was learning the hard way that Daddy's wallet wasn't bottomless, and that all those little conveniences she took for granted, hot lunches, rides to school, unlimited internet access, weekly allowance money, actually cost real money. Money that came from my job, which I did specifically to take care of her ungrateful ass. But the real fireworks were just about to begin. Because while all this family drama was playing out in our little house, I'd been working on something much bigger behind the scenes. Monday evening at 7 p.m., I heard a car door slam outside and looked out to see an Uber pulling away from my curb. Standing on my front lawn were 2 people who looked like they'd stepped straight out of a reality TV show about terrible life choices. Victoria looked like she was desperately cosplaying as a 25-year-old influencer. Too much Botox had left her face with that unnaturally frozen quality, and she had a fake tan that was at least 3 shades too dark for her natural complexion. She was wearing clothes that belonged in a teenager's closet, a crop top, and distressed jeans that were trying way too hard to be trendy. Her whole aesthetic screamed desperate woman trying to recapture her youth. and it was both pathetic and embarrassing to witness. Next to her was Brandon, and he was exactly what I'd expected based on Victoria's Instagram posts. He wore a thick gold chain that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment, a designer tracksuit that looked like it came straight from a rap video, and perfectly styled hair that had clearly taken him an hour to arrange. He was also wearing sunglasses at 7 p.m. because he thought it made him look cool and mysterious. The guy looked like a walking midlife crisis, the kind of man who drives a leased luxury car and tells everyone he's an entrepreneur while living off other people's money. "Marcus, open this door right now." Victoria was screeching from my front porch like some kind of banshee. "We need to talk about what you're doing to our daughter." I was sitting in my living room, clearly visible through the front window, calmly reading a book and completely ignoring their dramatic entrance. The irony was absolutely beautiful. They could see me, I could see them. But dead people don't respond to theatrical performances. Brandon stepped up to my door and started banging on it with his fist, clearly trying to intimidate me on my own property. "Yo, man, be a real father and handle this situation," he shouted through the wood. "Lily called us crying. This is messed up." I turned the page of my book with deliberate care. Stephen King really knew how to write a good horror story, and I was living in one right now. The only difference was that in my story, the monsters were standing on my front porch instead of hiding in the shadows. For the next hour and 15 minutes, I got the most entertaining free show I'd had in years. Victoria went through her entire emotional playbook, pulling out every manipulation tactic she'd perfected over the years. She started with demanding, pounding on my door and screaming about what a terrible father I was. When that didn't work, she moved to pleading, putting on her best victim voice and begging me to think about what I was doing to poor, innocent Lily. Then came the threats. She was going to call the police, she was going to take me to court, she was going to make sure everyone knew what kind of monster I really was. Finally, she resorted to dramatic crying about how I was traumatizing our daughter and destroying her emotional well-being. Brandon tried several different approaches to establish his dominance in this situation. First, he went with the intimidation angle, pounding on my door and yelling threats about what would happen if I didn't come outside and face him like a man. When that didn't work, he tried the reasonable adult approach, talking loudly about how we needed to work this out like civilized people for Lily's sake. Finally, he resorted to pacing around my yard like a caged animal, checking constantly to see if any neighbors were watching him get completely ignored by a guy sitting 10 feet away. The best part was watching them slowly realize that I could hear every single word they were saying. I could see everything they were doing, and I simply did not give a shit about any of it. Lily got home from her 2-mile death march right in the middle of their performance. The look on her face when she saw them standing in our front yard was absolutely priceless. Pure shock mixed with deep embarrassment. "Mom, what are you doing here?" she asked, her voice small and confused. "How did you even know where I was?" "Baby girl, I flew here the second I got your message," Victoria said, immediately switching into her concerned mother act. "This situation is completely unacceptable. Your father has obviously had some kind of mental breakdown, and you can't stay here with him acting like this." Victoria grabbed Lily and hugged her dramatically, making sure to project her voice loud enough for me to hear through the window. "Pack your things, princess," she announced with theatrical flair. "You're coming to Las Vegas with Brandon and me." Lily looked at me through the window, probably expecting some kind of reaction. Maybe she thought I'd come running outside, begging her not to leave and promising to go back to being her personal ATM and chauffeur service. "Dad, please, I'm sorry, okay? Can you just stop this?" she called out, her voice cracking with emotion. Nothing. I continued reading my book with the same level of interest I'd been showing all week. Victoria was getting more frantic by the minute. "Lily, get your suitcase. We're leaving tonight. You can finish school in Las Vegas, where people will actually appreciate you and treat you with the respect you deserve." But here's what Lily hadn't mentioned to her rescue squad during their dramatic phone conversations. She was currently on academic probation for ditching class to hang out with Kyle and his friends. If she transferred schools now without proper paperwork and procedures, she'd basically be expelled from the Wisconsin school system. There would be no easy transfer, no picking up where she left off, just a mess of bureaucratic complications that would follow her for years. Lily tried explaining this to Victoria, but her mother just waved it off like it was nothing more than a minor inconvenience. "Brandon knows people at the school board in Las Vegas," Victoria announced with complete confidence. "We'll handle it." Brandon, who had probably never been within 50 yards of a school board meeting in his entire life, nodded like he had the Las Vegas superintendent on speed dial. These people were completely delusional, living in a fantasy world where problems could be solved with connections they didn't actually have and money they didn't really possess. Lily managed to get her house key from the kitchen counter where she'd left it earlier, and they all trooped inside to pack her belongings. I could hear them moving around upstairs, with Victoria making grand pronouncements about how much better Lily's life was going to be in Las Vegas. "You'll have your own room with a view of the Strip," Victoria called out loudly, clearly hoping I could hear her from downstairs. "Brandon's going to teach you about entrepreneurship and business. You can intern at my wellness company and learn about building your own brand. This is going to be amazing, baby." An hour later, they came back downstairs with 2 suitcases and Lily's backpack. Lily kept looking back at me like she expected me to come running after them, begging her to stay and promising to return to our old dynamic, where I catered to her every whim. "Not happening, sweetheart." As they headed for the door, Victoria turned back for one final dramatic speech, clearly rehearsed for maximum emotional impact. "Marcus, when you come to your senses and realize what you've lost, don't come crawling back to us," she declared with all the theatrical flair of a soap opera villain. Lily deserves better than this childish behavior. She deserves a real family who will support her dreams and treat her with respect. The door slammed behind them with enough force to rattle the windows, and they were gone. My sister Kate came over about an hour later with pizza and some soda. She'd seen the whole drama unfold through her kitchen window across the street and couldn't resist coming over to get the full story. "So how long do you think they'll last?" she asked, settling in on my couch with a slice of pepperoni pizza and a knowing grin. "Victoria can barely handle Lily for a weekend visit when everything's going perfectly," I replied, taking a sip of my Coke. "Add in a new boyfriend who's never dealt with a real teenager, a cramped hotel room, and Lily's current attitude, and I give them until tomorrow night." Kate laughed, nearly choking on her pizza. "You're being generous. I say they'll be back by noon tomorrow." We were both wrong. They'd be back much sooner than either of us predicted. They lasted exactly 14 hours and 23 minutes. I know the exact time because I was sitting in my kitchen Tuesday morning at 9:23 a.m., drinking coffee and reading the news on my tablet, when my doorbell started ringing like someone's house was on fire. I looked out to see all 3 of them standing on my porch, looking like they'd been through some kind of natural disaster. Lily's hair was a complete mess. Her makeup was smudged and running down her face, and she had that hollow-eyed look of someone who hadn't slept in about 20 hours. Victoria looked frazzled and exhausted, her perfect influencer facade completely cracked and falling apart. Her designer clothes were wrinkled, her hair was disheveled, and she had the defeated posture of someone whose fantasy had just crashed into reality. Brandon just looked pissed off and uncomfortable, like he'd signed up for a fun weekend adventure and instead found himself trapped in a nightmare of teenage drama and family dysfunction. This time, Lily used her key to let them in, probably hoping that being invaded in my own space would finally get some kind of reaction from me. "Marcus, this ends right now," Victoria announced as they barged into my kitchen like some kind of intervention squad. "Lily has something very important to say to you." I continued reading an article about the local mayoral race with great interest. The incumbent was facing some serious challenges from a newcomer who had some innovative ideas about municipal waste management. Lily stepped forward, looking like she was about to burst into tears at any moment. "Dad, I'm really sorry about what I said," she began, her voice shaking with emotion. "I didn't mean any of it. Can we please just go back to normal? Please?" I scrolled down to read the comment section of the article. Some people had very strong opinions about the proposed changes to the snow removal budget. Brandon stepped forward, trying to look intimidating in my own kitchen while wearing yesterday's wrinkled tracksuit. "Listen, buddy, we need to work this out like adults," he said, attempting to use his most authoritative voice. "Lily's been through enough. This silent treatment thing is just cruel." That's when Lily completely lost her shit and turned on both of them. "Shut up, Brandon, just shut up," she screamed at the top of her lungs. "You don't know anything about me. Stop pretending to be my dad when you don't even know what grade. I'm in." The kitchen went dead silent except for the sound of me tapping the screen to read the next article about proposed changes to the municipal parking regulations. Victoria's face turned bright red with embarrassment and anger. "Lily Catherine Thompson, you apologize to Brandon right now," she demanded in her most authoritative mother voice. "He spent his own money to fly here and help you, and this is how you treat him?" "I don't care," Lily screamed back, her voice echoing through the house. "You guys fought all night in that gross hotel room. You," she pointed an accusing finger at Brandon, "kept trying to give me advice about boys when you've met me exactly 3 times on video calls. And you," she turned to Victoria with tears streaming down her face, "spent the whole time complaining about Dad, instead of actually talking to me." She was crying now, big ugly tears streaming down her face as months of pent-up frustration finally came pouring out. You want to know what's really messed up? She continued, her voice cracking with emotion. Dad knows I'm lactose intolerant, so he always buys special milk just for me. Dad knows I have anxiety during thunderstorms, so he always checks on me, even if I pretend to be asleep. Dad knows my favorite movie is actually The Princess Bride, even though I tell everyone it's some Marvel movie because I want to sound cool. Her voice was getting higher and more desperate as the words came tumbling out. Dad knows I hate the cafeteria pizza, but I'm too embarrassed to pack a lunch because Kyle says it's not cool. Dad knows I want to take AP Art next year, but I'm scared I'm not good enough. Dad knows everything about me because he's been here every single day for 8 years. She turned to look directly at me, and I could see the exact moment when everything finally clicked for her. When all the pieces fell into place and she understood what she had done. But I told him I wished he was dead, she said, her voice barely above a whisper now. I told him Brandon was more of a father to me than he was. I told him I couldn't wait to move away and never see him again. Her voice cracked completely as the full weight of her words hit her. And now he won't even look at me because I broke his heart. She pulled a wrinkled piece of paper out of her pocket and set it on the table next to my tablet with shaking hands. I wrote you a letter at the hotel, Dad, she said softly. I know you probably can't read it because dead people can't read, but I needed to write it anyway. I needed to tell you how sorry I am and how much I love you and how scared I am that I ruined everything between us. Victoria tried to interrupt, but Lily was just getting started. All the frustration and confusion that had been building up over the past few months was finally coming out. You left, Mom. You left when I was 9 years old, she said, turning to face Victoria with tears streaming down her cheeks. You call me maybe twice a month, and half the time you forget and just send a text instead. You forgot my birthday last year. You sent me a $25 Starbucks gift card 3 days late with a note that said, "Sorry, babe, crazy busy with work." She pointed an accusing finger at Brandon, who was looking increasingly uncomfortable as this family drama unfolded in front of him. And he asked me what my favorite subject was like I'm in elementary school. He bought me a frozen backpack at the airport because he thought I was 12. He spent 20 minutes explaining why I shouldn't have a boyfriend until I'm 30. Brandon looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. This clearly wasn't the family bonding experience he'd signed up for when he agreed to fly to Wisconsin. Baby, I was just trying to, Brandon started to say. Get out, Lily screamed at the top of her lungs, cutting him off mid-sentence. Get out of my house. This is my home with my dad and you don't belong here. Victoria grabbed her purse with shaking hands, her face flushed with embarrassment and anger. Fine. When you're ready to be reasonable and stop this childish behavior, you know how to reach me, she said, her voice tight with barely controlled fury. I am being reasonable, Lily shot back, her voice stronger now, more confident. For the first time in months, I'm seeing everything clearly. You don't want to be my mom. You want to be my fun aunt who shows up sometimes with presents and then disappears when things get hard. They stormed out without another word, leaving Lily standing in my kitchen shaking like a leaf. I could hear their car door slam outside, followed by the sound of their Uber pulling away from the curb. I finished reading the article about the mayoral race, closed my tablet, and looked at my daughter for the first time in 6 days. There's cereal in the pantry, I said quietly. School starts in an hour. Lily burst into tears and threw her arms around me in a desperate hug. I didn't hug her back yet. She wasn't quite there yet. But I didn't push her away either. This was progress, but we still had a long way to go. I'll do anything to fix this, Dad. Anything, she sobbed into my shoulder. I'll give up my phone permanently. I'll break up with Kyle. I'll do chores without complaining. I'll get a job to pay you back for everything. Just please don't hate me. I looked down at this kid who had put me through the worst week of my parenting life. The same child who had said things that cut me deeper than I thought possible, who had chosen her absent mother and some random guy over the father who'd been there every single day. But I also saw the little girl who used to fall asleep on my chest during movies, who came running to me when she had nightmares, who used to tell me I was her favorite person in the whole world. We'll see, I said. Over the next few weeks, Lily was working harder than I'd ever seen her work at anything in her life. She was getting herself up in the morning without any help from me, attempting to make breakfast for both of us. Badly. But she was genuinely trying. She was doing laundry without being asked, cleaning the house like she was training for the Olympics, and actually completing her homework assignments on time for the first time in months. She broke up with Kyle, which happened in spectacular fashion when she overheard him bragging to his friends about how he was going to ride this Las Vegas money train through her mom's connections. Turns out Kyle's interest in Lily had been directly proportional to what he thought her family could do for him financially. The moment he realized there was no money or connections to exploit, his true feelings became crystal clear. She started hanging out with this kid named Jason from her AP history class. A nice, quiet guy who actually treated her with respect and shared her interests in art and movies. The difference between how Jason treated her and how Kyle had treated her was like night and day. Jason asked about her opinions, listened when she talked, and never once tried to pressure her into anything she wasn't comfortable with. But the real fireworks were just getting started, because while all this family drama was playing out in our house, I'd been working on something much bigger behind the scenes. Remember how I mentioned documenting Victoria's lifestyle while she claimed to be broke? Well, I'd spent months putting together a comprehensive case with my lawyer, and we'd finally filed for aggressive child support enforcement with the state. This wasn't just a casual complaint. This was a full-scale legal assault backed by months of meticulous evidence gathering. Turns out Miss I'm too broke to pay child support had been severely underreporting her income for years. When you added up her Instagram sponsorship deals, her life coaching scam operation, the cash payments from grateful clients who thought she was some kind of spiritual guru, and the money she'd been getting from Brandon and her previous boyfriends, she was actually pulling in close to $190,000 a year. Meanwhile, she'd been claiming to the courts that she made less than $25,000 annually. The state's Child Support Enforcement Office was very interested in this massive discrepancy between her reported income and her actual lifestyle. They were particularly fascinated by the detailed documentation I'd provided: screenshots of her expensive vacations, receipts for designer purchases, evidence of luxury apartment rentals, and a comprehensive timeline of her spending habits over the past several years. 3 weeks after the Las Vegas disaster, my phone rang. It was Victoria, and she sounded absolutely panicked. "Marcus, we need to talk," she said, her voice tight with barely controlled fear. "There are some legal issues that I think we can work out privately without involving lawyers or the courts." "I'm sorry, who is this?" I replied calmly. "Dead people don't take phone calls." "Marcus, this is serious," she said, her composure cracking completely. "The state is saying I owe thousands in back support. They're threatening to garnish my accounts and freeze my business assets." "Sounds like a you problem," I said, and hung up. But I wasn't done with Victoria yet. Not by a long shot. See, I'd also sent all of Victoria's social media evidence to the IRS, because if you're going to commit tax fraud while dodging child support, you probably shouldn't document your crimes on Instagram with geotagged photos and detailed spending updates. 2 weeks later, the real fun started. The state had placed liens on Victoria's business accounts and started garnishing money directly from her coaching program payments. Her clients' payments were being intercepted before she ever saw them, and her carefully constructed lifestyle was getting very expensive very quickly. Brandon started getting nervous about the legal heat surrounding Victoria and the fact that his sugar mama was suddenly broke. Turns out his entrepreneurial income wasn't quite as solid as he'd been pretending, and he'd been living off Victoria's unreported cash flow for months. When that money dried up, his true financial situation became apparent very quickly. A month after the hotel disaster, Victoria showed up at my door again. But this time she was alone, and she looked like absolute hell. Gone was the fake tan, the designer clothes, the perfect Instagram facade that she'd spent years constructing. She looked like what she actually was, a 36-year-old woman who'd spent 8 years running from her responsibilities and was finally facing the consequences of her choices. "Marcus, please, I know I messed up," she said, her voice small and defeated. "The state is garnishing everything. My business accounts are frozen. Brandon left me when the money situation got complicated. I'm getting evicted from my apartment next week." I opened the door but didn't invite her in, just stood there looking at this woman who had abandoned our daughter and spent years living a lie. "I'll pay the child support," she said desperately, the words tumbling out like she'd rehearsed them. "All of it, plus interest and penalties. I'll get a real job. I'll move back to Wisconsin. I'll do whatever you want. Just please help me figure out how to handle this legal situation." "Why would I help you?" I asked, genuinely curious about her reasoning. Because Lily needs her mother," she said, grasping for any argument that might work. I actually laughed out loud. "Lily needed her mother 8 years ago, Victoria. Where were you then?" Victoria started crying. Real tears this time, not the performed emotion she usually relied on for sympathy. "I know I was selfish," she admitted, her voice breaking. "I know I abandoned her when she needed me most. But I can change. I want to be better. I want to be the mother she deserves." "You want me to help you because you finally got caught being a deadbeat parent," I said bluntly. "That's not growth, Victoria. That's just consequences catching up to you." She fell to her knees on my front porch, actually got down on her knees and begged like something out of a bad movie. Please, Marcus, I have nowhere else to go, she sobbed. My parents won't talk to me because I've been lying to them for years about my situation. My sister blocked my number after I tried to borrow money from her. You're literally the only person who might help me. Lily had been listening from the living room and came outside to see what was happening. The sight of her mother on her knees, begging on our front porch, was something I don't think she was prepared for. Mom, are you okay? What's going on? Lily asked, her voice filled with concern and confusion. Victoria looked up at Lily with mascara running down her face, and her perfect image completely shattered. Baby, Mommy made some really bad choices with money, she said, trying to maintain some dignity while kneeling on concrete. And now I'm in serious trouble. I need help. Lily looked at me, then back at her mother kneeling on our porch. What kind of help? I need somewhere to stay while I figure out the legal issues, Victoria said. And maybe your dad could help me find a lawyer who won't charge me everything I don't have. The silence stretched on for a full minute while I watched Lily process everything. Her mother, who'd abandoned her, was now literally begging for help from the father she'd told to drop dead just weeks earlier. It was poetic justice at its finest. I let Victoria stay on her knees for a good 5 minutes while I thought about my options. Lily was looking back and forth between us, probably realizing for the first time in her life how pathetic her cool mom really was. Here's what's going to happen, I finally said, breaking the silence. You can sleep on the couch for exactly 1 week, not a day longer. Victoria nodded frantically, clearly willing to accept any terms I offered. During that week, you'll pay Lily $1,200 as a start on 8 years of missed birthday money, Christmas money, and general neglect, I continued. Marcus, I don't have $1,200 right now, Victoria said, panic creeping into her voice. Then sell something, I replied without sympathy. That designer purse, those fake nails, whatever jewelry you've got. Figure it out. Victoria nodded frantically. Okay, yes, I can do that. I'm not finished, I said, holding up my hand. You'll also write Lily a detailed letter apologizing for abandoning her and explaining exactly why you made the choices you made. No excuses, no victim narrative, just honest accountability. And, I continued, watching Victoria's face carefully, you'll post on all your social media accounts admitting that you've been a deadbeat mother who abandoned her child and lied about your finances to avoid paying support. Victoria's face went white as a sheet. Her entire online brand was built around being this successful, independent woman who had it all figured out. Admitting she was a fraud would destroy everything she'd built over the past 8 years. Marcus, please, that would ruin my business completely, she begged. You built that business on lies while your daughter went without new clothes because you wouldn't pay support, I said coldly. Your choice. Take the deal or sleep in your car. Lily was staring at her mother with a mixture of pity and disgust. Just do it, Mom. Tell the truth for once in your life. Victoria looked between us and realized she was completely out of options. Brandon was gone. Her money was frozen by the state. Her fake lifestyle was over. She had nothing left except the mercy of the people she'd screwed over. Okay, she whispered. I'll do everything you asked. That night, Victoria posted a long, detailed confession on Instagram. She admitted she'd been a terrible mother, that she'd abandoned Lily, that she'd been lying about her financial situation to avoid paying child support, and that her entire online persona was basically a fraud. The response was swift and brutal. She lost about 70% of her followers over the next week. Her coaching clients started demanding refunds, sponsors dropped her left and right, and her whole fake empire came crashing down. And it was beautiful to watch. But here's the thing. Seeing my ex-wife's life fall apart didn't make me feel as good as I thought it would. She was pathetic, sleeping on my couch, desperately trying to find any kind of legitimate work after years of running scams. She was getting exactly what she deserved, but watching Lily see her mother be such a complete failure was actually kind of heartbreaking. The silver lining was Kyle trying to come crawling back when he heard Lily's mom was staying with us. He thought maybe the Las Vegas money situation was back on track and he could resume his gold-digging operation. Lily told him to get lost and informed him that if he ever contacted her again, she'd tell everyone at school about the time he cried because his mom took away his video games for a week. 2 months later, Victoria had found a job at a call center making $17 an hour, her first legitimate employment in years. She moved into a small apartment across town and started making court-ordered child support payments for the first time in 8 years. More importantly, she started actually calling Lily regularly and visiting every weekend. Not because she wanted to play the fun parent role, but because she was genuinely trying to rebuild the relationship she'd destroyed. Lily was still a work in progress. Some weeks she'd be helpful, responsible, and mature. showing real growth from the lessons she'd learned. Other weeks, she'd slip back into teenage attitude and entitlement, testing boundaries and seeing if I'd revert to my old enabling behavior. But overall, she was growing up and learning that actions have real consequences. The spoiled brat, who told me she wished I was dead, was slowly being replaced by someone who understood that respect is earned, not demanded, and that family relationships require effort from everyone involved. She'd learned that the world doesn't revolve around her wants and needs, and that the people who love you most are often the ones setting boundaries, not the ones giving you everything you ask for. Looking back, those 6 days of being dead were some of the most important days of my parenting life. Sometimes the best way to show someone how much you mean to them is to show them what life looks like without you. Sometimes love means letting people face the consequences of their choices, even when it breaks your heart to watch. And sometimes, just sometimes, being a ghost is exactly what your family needs to come back to life.